So the year is 1997. I'm just a little wide-eyed wrestling movie fan who happened to dig reading books about deep-sea monster adventure stories. And one day I came across Michael Crichton's novel Sphere, which was originally released in 1987. The basic premise is that the US Navy discovers a spaceship buried deep under coral under the middle of the ocean, and it's been resting there for about 300 years. Naturally, the Navy wants to go investigate, and they send a group of scientists down to the bottom, and, well, things don't go well, and they pretty much all go to hell. Look, to say that I love this book is a bit of an understatement. I've reread it so many times since childhood. I love this book, and in 1998, I got hyped as hell, because after finishing the book, I discovered that they were making a film adaptation out of it, and it was going to have a really good cast, and I was really psyched for it. I was begging my parents to take me to it. But lo and behold, somehow, someway, my Uncle Mike turned out to be the one to take me. And I don't think that he was as psyched for it as I was. In fact, I know that he wasn't. But God bless the man, he still took me to go see the movie. And we must have been one of the few people, because this movie didn't do very well at the box office. I thought that for the most part they did the book justice. They did take some liberties with it. But hey, sometimes, it's kind of inevitable when you're making movies in Hollywood. Yeah, it only made about $32 million on an $80 million budget. It definitely was a bomb in its day. So why am I here? Why am I talking about this movie? Why do I love this movie? Well, what do you guys say we go through it and find out why this movie worked for me as a kid, and does it still hold up? The film opens with a helicopter flying over the Pacific Ocean carrying our star of the movie, Dustin Hoffman, playing the part of Norman Goodman. Norman is a psychologist who has been told by the FAA that he has been assigned to a plane crash because he specializes in dealing with survivors of catastrophes. When Norman arrives, he is shocked to discover that there was no plane crash, but he is actually part of a team that is being gathered to the bottom of the ocean to investigate a 300-year-old spaceship and make first contact if there is an alien life form on board. The team is made up of a mathematician, Harry, played by Samuel motherfucking Jackson, a biochemist, Beth, played by Sharon Stone.
Your mother was no Sharon Stone.
An astrophysicist, Ted, played by Liv Schreiber, Wolverine's brother, and a kinda shady US Navy appointed character named Barnes, played by Peter Coyote. Funny enough, Norman wrote the official report and protocol for this type of alien situation years prior when he worked for the Bush Senior Administration. But he didn't take it seriously at the time and only did it for the money.
It's like people only do things because they get paid.
The only one of the team that actually knows that the report is a sham is Harry, and he certainly isn't happy about it, but he keeps Norman's secret. Before the team goes down, they are instructed that when they come topside, they're going to need to decompress for several days or else their bodies are going to burst, which I think is a pretty good plot point because so many movies never seem to get that detail right. After a pretty cool underwater scene as they go down into the depths, they connect to the habitat, which is connected to the big fucking ship, and afterwards they have their obligatory moments of shock and awe as they make their way to the spacecraft. And once inside, the team discovers what they believe to be humanoid alien skeletons. But it turns out that they happen to be good old-fashioned human being remains because Norman and Beth figure out that the ship isn't a UFO after all, but it's an American spacecraft that managed to fly through a black hole and arrive back on Earth 300 years ago. On top of this revelation, it would appear that the ship was designed to go out and capture objects found in the vastness of space, such as a giant golden sphere that's located in the cargo hold. Everyone is amazed and astounded at the size of this giant golden sphere, which seems to have been made for a giant golden god.
The Golden God!
Everyone is trying to figure out what the sphere is, that is, except for Norman, who seems to be the only one that is concerned that the sphere is reflecting everything in the room except for themselves. Meanwhile, back on the habitat, Ted and Harry converse, try to figure out what happened to the ship and how it arrived on Earth 300 years ago. Ted is able to deduce that the ship didn't crash, but actually arrived at the bottom, but cannot figure out why they never left and why they all have injuries. Due to a lack of alien life being found on the ship, the Navy has decided to pull everyone out. While everyone is getting ready for a nap before the big ride back, Harry makes a scary proclamation. Harry believes everyone will be dead because when the ship went through the black hole, it marked the date and it said unknown event. And as Harry put it, how could it know that it's an unknown event? If they just discovered time travel and ships going through black holes, they would go to the surface and tell everyone that it happened. But if no one knew what happened, that means they never made it out. A few hours later, Harry is seen leaving the habitat, setting off a shit ton of alarms as he makes his way back to the ship. And he stands in front of the sphere and somehow goes inside of it. Norman goes after him and manages to find Harry, but he's now passed out. A moment later, it seems as though Norman goes inside the sphere just before the Navy disconnects from the habitat due to a storm that is gathering on the surface, preventing their escape. For the next few days, the team is down there on their own. While all this is happening, one of the Navy habitat crew members that is played by Queen Latifah,
Holy shit!
the Queen ventures out to the escape sub to reset a 12-hour timer inside of it. The sub is designed to hold the CCTV security tapes in case a disaster happens, so there's a record left behind of what happened. And if the timer isn't reset before 12 hours, the sub will automatically go to the surface. I would hate to be the person who has to go out into that creepy-ass dark water and reset the timer. As Queen Latifah is venturing back, she is attacked by a swarm of jellyfish that seem to appear from out of nowhere, burn through her suit, and kill her. A pretty unpleasant death, to say the least. Upon retrieving the body and the jellyfish that are still attached to her, Beth informs Norman that the jellyfish are unlike any that have ever been found on Earth. They simply do not exist. After being brought back to the habitat, Harry finally wakes up and seems to be very chirpy, until he eats what he thought were onion rings, but turn out to be calamari, which he has hated since he detests squid ever since he read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when he was a kid.
Feelings mutual.
The next thing you know, all the computers on the habitat start going haywire and begin to display the same code over and over and over again. Ted and Harry are able to decipher it, and it seems as though they're dealing with a friendly alien entity and they think it's coming from the sphere. Everyone seems to be very excited about this, except for Norman. Of course, once again, he's got to bring everybody down because of his suspicions. Because Jerry has emotions, Norman wonders what happens if he gets mad.
Jerry! Jerry!
And then Jerry disappears. Later on, Beth and Norman go outside to investigate a mysterious thumping sound which is revealed to be the body of Naval Officer Edmonds. She was crushed to death by something huge. Then a bunch of eggs start to fall from above them as Captain Barnes tells them they're not alone out there. Norman and Beth just barely make it back to the habitat. The team attempts to contact Jerry again, but to their chagrin, they find Jerry can actually hear everything they are saying, and Jerry is unwilling to give them some time alone with their own thoughts. Norman tries to reason with Jerry. Jerry doesn't want to hear any of it. Jerry gets more and more angry, and next thing you know, Jerry has manifested a giant squid that is crushing the habitat. During the struggle, Ted and Barnes are killed gruesomely, while Harry is asleep this whole time. So at this point, everything is fucked. The ship is being attacked by a squid, it's on fire, Barnes and Ted are dead, nothing is going well.
Jerry, it's Frankenstein's and Mr. Steinbrenner's here. George is dead. Call me back.
Just as it seems what's left of the crew is about to be killed, the attack and the fire stop, seemingly miraculously. After the fire, the habitat is hanging on by a thread. Norman attempts to speak to Jerry and try to figure out what the hell caused them to attack them, but Jerry seems docile now, but does not understand that he killed most of the crew and they cannot be brought back for his amusement. Norman tries to explain to Jerry why Ted and the others can't be brought back to life, and the fact that Jerry cannot control his emotions, and if he attacks them again, there will be no one left for Jerry to talk to. Norman asks Jerry if he understands, to which Jerry responds, "Stop calling me Jerry." This clearly perplexes Norman. Later on, Harry finally wakes up, but once again he is completely oblivious as to what is going on around him, with the habitat leaking, overall looking like shit, and the sudden disappearance of most of his colleagues. Beth and Norman decide that Harry is clearly not right in the head, so they plan on working together and leave as little responsibility to Harry as possible. When Norman goes out to the sub to restart the timer, he runs into major issues with his suit, which begins to fail on him, and he gets attacked by a sea snake, but gets away. While his suit was failing, it was actually Harry that helped him get back to the habitat, throwing the question out, where was Beth while Norman had his episode? Turns out Beth went to the spaceship. When she returns, she is questioned. She tells them that she went looking for food because there was none left on the habitat. However, somehow, the food is returned, and according to Beth, Harry must have been behind it and hidden the food. Tensions are now really starting to rise, as no one seems to be trusting each other now. As Beth rolls out in a huff, Norman finds that all the food has been changed to a ton of copies of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, as Harry is reading the book. Norman goes back to the computer, asking Jerry why this is happening, but he only gets, "Stop calling me Jerry" again. Now, Norman takes it upon himself to do the math and break down the binary code for the communication with Jerry.
I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
Once Norman wraps his mind around the math, he discovers that it is in fact Harry, not Jerry, that the team has been talking to this whole time, or at least his subconscious, since he worked on the binary code after he came out of the sphere. So basically, every time that Harry goes to sleep and has dreams, it causes effects on everyone else's reality. So Beth and Norman figured that they need to put Harry in a dreamless sleep by proxy of a drug cocktail for the rest of their time under the sea.
Under the sea.
Norman has an incident with more sea snakes, but this time inside the habitat, as they crawl up his leg. And Beth walks by, seeing the commotion, and like a boss, grabs them both because they are poisonous only during the day, as they are nocturnal animals. And I guess, yeah, it was during the day, even though they're underwater in the dark. Whatever. Beth then calls Norman up to the lab at the top level of the habitat. She locks him in and demands that Norman take the drug cocktail. Beth knows that Norman also went into the sphere because after she put the snakes into jars, they disappeared right in front of her eyes. Thus, Norman's fear of sea snakes is causing them to materialize, and Beth can no longer trust Norman. Beth releases the air from the room, causing water to come in. Although she is telling Norman to take the shot, it is clear that she is ready to kill him, as the water has risen so high, if he were to fall asleep, he would surely drown. Norman does the only thing that he can think of: pop the top of the lab and try to swim to the diver's entrance at the bottom. And since the water is so damn cold, he has maybe a minute or two. Norman does just that, and makes it, but barely. And while he was swimming, Beth was having a breakdown of her own, as she has visions of Barnes questioning her sanity, and runs into what is left of his body. After drying himself off, Norman goes looking for Beth, only to find her in a curled up ball, sobbing, having come to terms with what she just tried to do to Norman. Norman and Beth have a heart-to-heart and realize what the sphere has done to their psyche, providing them with the absolute power to create anything out of their imagination, but not having the mental control to keep it in check.
Imagination.
Harry once again wakes up from his slumber, and I gotta say, we could probably make a drinking game out of this. Have a shot every time Harry wakes up from a dream.
Awesome! I'm wasted!
Harry goes and asks Beth and Norman what the hell is going on and why they drugged him. So Norman gives him the rundown and throws in the fact that this very scenario happened to the crew from the future and explains why they all had injuries and never left the ocean floor. They killed each other because they couldn't trust each other. Just then, the alarms begin to go off, informing them that the Panther explosives set up around the habitat are about to go off in about 15 minutes. Where did these bombs come from? Well, Beth thought it would be a good idea to set them up around the habitat just in case the squid came a-knocking again, but didn't realize that having the explosives so close to the habitat would likely destroy the whole site, so they gotta get the fuck out of Dodge. They get a move on and make it to the sub, but suddenly they are teleported back to the spaceship and they cannot find their way out. They run and run and run, but there is no escape in sight. It actually would seem that Harry is so convinced that they are meant to die there that he has created some type of a mental block keeping Norman from hitting the button to start the ascent. To which eventually, Norman breaks through and hits the big red button.
Push the little red button.
Push the button.
The sub floats away, and they make it just far away enough from the underwater explosion to float to the surface, where the Navy is waiting for them to put them in decompression. As they sit inside the chamber, they try to figure out why they are still alive, and if the Navy were to find out what kind of power they have, will they be studied or possibly used as a weapon of some kind? They just don't know. They figure the only way to get out of this whole thing is to use the power of the sphere to forget that they have the power. They count down to 1, 2, 3, and with each count, the sphere levitates higher and higher out of the ocean, and on 3 it flies right back into space, perhaps to find another civilization that is ready to handle the power of the sphere, which humanity is clearly not ready for, as Norman put it. And with that said, the sphere flies into another black hole as credits roll. And that was Sphere in a nutshell. And as you can see, my fandom for this movie still holds up today. Now, it definitely isn't perfect. It's not a blockbuster. It's not an award winner. It's not the greatest film of all time. But I still find it very enjoyable. I like the performances by the actors like Dustin Hoffman, Peter Coyote, Liv Schreiber. If there's a big negative to put into it, I think that Samuel L. Jackson was rather underused. Like I said, he's pretty much sleeping most of the movie. Beth and Norman seem to have a very underwritten kind of former love story, which, if I remember correctly, was not in the book. I do not recall that. Also, Beth is not portrayed as she is in the book. In the book, think of a woman kind of like China. She is very buff. She doesn't like men, super feminist, so she's a tough cookie to crack. She doesn't get along with everybody, but by the end of it, you wonder whether or not she actually held on to the power, because although in the film they don't show this, which is unfortunate, she becomes more beautiful in the book. And after everybody supposedly forgot it, Norman notices Beth and can't help but notice how pretty she has become since they came up from since they came to the surface. So there's definitely stuff that they left out in the book, like Beth possibly keeping the power. There are some better scenes in it of the squid attacking Norman while he is resetting the sub before they go up. But I think that they kind of took the Jaws approach, where less is more, and they probably didn't want to show a really bad CGI octopus. Or maybe they weren't even given time to finish it, because apparently Barry Levinson and Dustin Hoffman allegedly have said that they weren't really able to finish the film. They felt that it was very much unfinished. Warner Brothers rushed them to meet the summer deadline, and they didn't want to spend any more money because, well, they spent about $80 million on this. And, well, from a financial point, you can see why they stopped pumping money into this, because it didn't do well at the box office. But at the same time, for fans of this book, such as myself, it would have been nice if they had been able to get those scenes in there. And the ending is a little bit rushed, not gonna lie. But as cheesy as the special effects may be for the explosion, the nostalgia of being in the theaters and seeing that on a big screen is very much unmatchable. I feel like a kid again when I watch this film. I enjoy it very much. And I've shown it to friends who, didn't grow up with it, and they actually liked it. They also agree with me that, not that everybody agrees with me, they do agree that the ending is a bit rushed. It's a little bit muddled, but overall, I think that the first half is great. It starts to kind of lose its footing towards the end, but it's still overall a fun ride. So, with that said, guys, 1998 Sphere. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a Michael Crichton fan or just a fan of this book in general and you just haven't watched the film yet. Go check it out. And who knows, I've been hearing some rumors that Warner Brothers has been looking at the property and maybe thinking about remaking it, but given our current climate right now with the whole Rona situation, who knows when that'll be. But I wouldn't mind it if they took another crack at this story, because I do enjoy this film, but improvements could be made. With that said, catch you later, guys. This has been the Wrestling Movie Guy. Thank you very much for checking out my channel, and if you could leave a like, share, and subscribe for me, that would be most appreciated. So, until the next episode, peace out, guys.